We are working with definition and description this week to work on our writing project 1. So we begin with chapter 7. Recently, M Global has decided to change its insurance provider, and Carrie Camp, Vice President for Human Resources, has decided to take this opportunity to revise the packet of information about benefits that is given to all employees in the United States. Although employees will continue to receive the detailed information about benefits from the insurance provider, Carrie knows that employees have asked for a quick, easy-to-read overview of the benefits available to them. Now, if you have worked for a large employer in the past, you may have been given one of these packets before. Maybe it's 3 pages long or 7 pages long, and it indicates to you which insurance providers are available to you and has a little chart of similarities and differences, what kinds of things are provided for what is the level of coverage, what are the deductibles, and so forth. And these nice little tables and charts and things make it an easy-to-read overview, right, so that you can select what's going to work best for you and or your family. And this is exactly the sort of a job that technical writing can do really, really well, is take something highly obscure, very jargonistic, very field-related and close, and someone who understands all of that knowledge information, has that specialized vocabulary, can take that information and chunk it down for easy reading for people who are not specialists. And that's what definition and description can do very, very nicely. Okay, so Carrie decides to create a set of information sheets that both define and describe each of the benefits in the new benefits package. On page 212 in your book, for one of these sheets, Carrie has created for the packet, so you can see Model 7.2. Definitions, descriptions, process explanations, and instructions are the types of writing that people often think of when they think of technical communication. This chapter and Chapter 8 explain these 4 elements of technical communication. Definitions and descriptions are closely related. Process explanations and instructions are also closely related. You can think of it this way. Definitions and descriptions tell us what something is, whereas process explanations and instructions tell us how to do something. With the difference being how the reader will use the documents. In fact, descriptions are similar to definitions because when you're defining something, you generally need to use several different modes of writing to provide a definition. You don't simply go to a dictionary and copy a definition and plunk it in and say, there, I've defined it. Okay, so in fact, descriptions often open with a short definition, but they also emphasize the physical details of the object being described. Like definitions, descriptions often appear as supporting information in the document body or in appendices. Guidelines for writing definitions. Definitions are essential for terms that users may be unfamiliar with. They're also important for terms that are taken for granted. Sometimes terms are in common use and they mean something fairly general, whereas very often a key term, when it's in the context of something technical, means something quite different. Okay, so if you are using key terms and concepts that differ from one another, from one context to another, or that may be open to interpretation, definitions establish a common language for the writer and the reader. The importance of definitions can be seen every day. If an application deadline is 2 weeks before the end of the semester, what is the end of the semester? You know, and as college students, I'm sure you have probably asked this question many times. Is the end of the semester the end of instruction, or is the end of the semester the end of finals week? You will also need to define abstract terms in your workplace writing. What is a strategic goal? How do you know if your project is user-centered? Readers may each have their own definitions, so you need to offer descriptions, processes, analogies, explanations to support your definition. And you have a guideline here, definition guideline, keep it simple. Occasionally the sole purpose of a report is to define a term. Yes. that is true. Sometimes the sole purpose of any given report is to define a term. Why? Because people need that definition in order to go forward with any of their plans. Most often, however, a definition just clarifies a term in a document with a larger purpose, in which case definitions come as needed in the document, or if the whole document is really about implementing a particular item or procedure, then the definition comes up front. So let's look at your assignment. Here we are. The assignment this week says you're going to read and take notes on Chapter 7 in your textbook, which we've just previewed. This chapter is about writing definitions and descriptions. For the purpose of this and future homework, you work for the organization that your group has been assigned, and that organization you should treat as something that you could possibly do upon graduation from college. 3, the homework assignment is to write an open letter, right? So that's not to one person, it's to general readers. An open letter containing a definition and a description, okay? And it can be of a piece of equipment or it can be of a procedure. And I say here that it is currently at use in your organization. And I say this because as specialists in your field, you already have a pretty good acquaintance with the equipment and the procedures that are used in your field. And so you will want to play to your strengths here and go to something that you know. And currently in use is, it's a good idea because, you know, it really does exist and you really can describe it. Now, if you use something that is currently in use, you do research, you absolutely must cite your sources. You absolutely must avoid plagiarizing the material. You absolutely must paraphrase whatever you look at, okay, so that we don't get into trouble. Can you make something up, something that is sort of cutting edge and interesting, and avoid the need for citation? If you feel like being creative that way, that's all right, but make it really seem like something that exists in the world, and that's fine and cool, and I'm game. Okay, so choose a procedure or a piece of equipment that already exists. Do research on this procedure or piece of equipment. Cite your sources in APA style with signal phrases that state publication details and in-text citations that give the date of publication. Okay, APA style is, as we call it, author date system, which means that all of the citations need to include the name of the author and the date. And in the cases where, if you're looking at a white paper or something, if there's no author, then it's title and date. Title of the article and the date, and that goes in your signal phrase so that you can cite your sources in text. So you want to avoid using any more than a few words from any source. In APA style, you're supposed to prefer paraphrasing. You're not supposed to focus on quotation. And put these words, anything that you borrow directly, they need to be in quotation marks, okay? Source types include anyone's speech, anyone's publication, any internet source, and actually really any student work too, okay? Make whatever you choose something small. I don't necessarily mean physically small, I mean not overly complex. Something that you can fully develop your definition and description in the word count given. So it could actually kind of be a large object, but that has a pretty simple function. Or it could be something quite tiny, okay? But it should be something that's involved in your future work. Your audience is your employer and your coworkers, okay? So people inside of your organization are your audience. Your purpose is to explain to them the function of the tool or the procedure. So what does it do in a couple of sentences? How can they identify it? How can they visualize it working? Make a recommendation about the safety of this piece of equipment or procedure. Your selection of definition and descriptive language should not only give readers a clear image and understanding of the item, but also lead them to understanding why the item is or is not safe on the job. Now, what would be cool here is if you pick something that is quite special in your field, and something that maybe the rest of the world doesn't know that much about, doesn't understand it, hasn't seen it before, that will really test and prove your quality of description and definition. It will help you think about how to describe something that is quite unfamiliar to people and make it feel familiar so that they can see it in their mind. And that is the power of descriptive language. That is what descriptive language should do. It should help your readers who've never seen the item before, who don't have an understanding of what it is. And your descriptive language should help them to be able to picture it, okay? You are writing in response to a company memo from your employer or supervisor. It has a date, August 15th, 2018. Maybe I should update that in a future assignment. Okay. Expressing concern about a safety issue and requesting your expert opinion about the safety of the piece of equipment or procedure. So the purpose of your writing is to respond to a concern about safety. In the letter, she or he has asked you to define and explain the thing, to write a description of it, and to give your recommendation as to whether the organization should continue to use this piece of equipment or procedure or replace it. Your description will be used to address concerns for all staff at your organization, which includes both technical and non-technical personnel, some of whom must communicate your finding to interested parties outside the company. So we need to have very, very sharp language that can communicate something complex pretty simply so that readers easily understand it. So you need to address the various needs of this broad audience. Consider who are the possible people that might be reading this and what are their needs for reading this. You need to consider how best to organize your information and to include the technical detail that is needed by members of this audience. You will invent your own role as writer of this open letter. Give yourself a job title that is appropriate to the job that you anticipate you will have or would like to have once you're employed in your field. And as with all the assignments, right, you're always writing as a member of the organization that you're assigned and as someone who has graduated with a bachelor's degree within the last year or 2 or 3. Okay. You write as the expert on your topic. You write for the needs of the readers. As the expert, you're supposed to have the technical information. Okay. So do pick something that you can do that with. You need to be accurate and objective. You need to use ABC format as described in your textbook. Also, I'm requiring that you use at least 2 analogies. So again, you're going to need to take something that is complex and or unfamiliar to readers and offer them something that is like it so that they can more easily understand what you are talking about. You should practice the visualizing test with a friend as well. Have somebody you know read your writing and see if that friend, and also make sure it's a friend who isn't in your college classes with you, someone who is really distant, someone who would make a good sort of a non-technical audience for this, and ask if that person can see it. Also, maybe you make sure that it's not a friend who's going to just say, yeah, that's great. Friends who are critical, those are good friends to have. Okay. All right, and then by Thursday, you're going to comment on your group members' work. You're going to talk about the persona. You're going to talk about how well they address the needs of readers. You're going to talk about their accuracy and objectivity. You're going to use their ABC format. Did they do that well? And you're going to comment on their analogies. Now, tone is something I don't want to hammer at it because I know that you all kind of get it. But you're talking to a team member. You're not a teacher talking to a student. You're not a parent talking to a child. Team building is about recognizing that we are in this together. We are equals. There should be an acknowledgement of something specific that impressed you in the work, and there should be a suggestion or a question about something that can be improved. So you do want to be critical, but be careful not to be a critical parent. And that's a job skill, believe me. Learning how to speak to people and encourage them to want to work with you is, well, we all have to work on that, don't we? Good luck.